Welcome to the i24 News Podcast, Synagogue and State. I'm your host, Mike Wagon. I'm joined this week by our special guest, Yehudah Glick, a former member of Knesset for the Likud Party and an activist for Jewish prayer rights on the Temple Mount. An amazing story, Yehudah Glick, and great to have you on with us today. First thing I want to talk to you about, it hasn't gotten much attention in the global news, or for that matter, really within Israel, but it appears, at least on the surface, that there is right now Jewish prayer going on an active basis on the Temple Mount, which has been a hot button issue in Israel for such a long time now. Israelis, Jews are pulled off the Temple Mount if they appear to pray, if there's any inclination that they might actually pray. But it appears now there is prayer going on the Temple Mount. It's not getting much attention. First, what do you know, and why is it not getting the attention that one would think that something of this magnitude would get?
Actually, I'm very happy it's not getting attention because, and I'll explain to you, it's been going on for quite a while, and it's been mostly on the level of, I would say, the police ignoring, even though they're knowing what's going on, but actually pretty much allowing it to happen without trying to cause any troublesome. What happened is what mainly happened. That's the idea. What's happened is that the numbers of Jews and even non-Jews going up the Temple Mount in the last 3 years has been jumped. It's a major jump, very, very dramatically. I mean, if just for little small numbers, 2014 there were 180,000 non-Muslim tourists on Temple Mount. In 2018, there are 670,000. In 2019, we're going to be finishing with 750,000. In terms of Jews, in 2014, we had like 12,000. In 2018, we finished with 35,000, and this year we're getting close to 50,000. And that is means that if in the past the Jews going on to Temple Mount were really small numbers, and the police would actually guard them and not allow them to do prayer. Now that the quiet has returned to the Temple Mount, and more people are coming to the Temple Mount, and the more people come, the quieter it is. The policemen are allowing people to pray, and it's been going on for several months, maybe I would say even a year, that it's really been going on quietly. I'm happy that that the world is getting to know about it, and you see that it's not bringing a third world war. I just, we believe in evolution and not revolution. We believe that things should happen gradually, and that's what's happening. And I think it's a very, very positive step that in this process.
Yeah, people need to understand the context behind this. And when the IDF liberated the Temple Mount in 1967, almost immediately turned over administrative control to the Jordanian-controlled Waqf, which basically started turning Jews back away again. There's nothing in the law that says that a Jew cannot ascend the Temple Mount to pray. In fact, the Supreme Court found that a Jew could pray just as long as the police determined that it wasn't going to basically cause a ruckus. It wasn't going to lead to violence. And it seemed like the police just issued their own blanket ban rather than dealing with every issue of prayer on a case-by-case basis. So why the change now? It just can't be the sheer numbers of it. Why the change in the police's stance?
Look, you have to know that in the last few years, there's been a major change in the attitude because of what happened was that for several years, every single Jew that went up to the Temple Mount was harassed, and there was a lot of incitement going on. And 4 years ago, the state of Israel, for the first time, outlawed what's called the Northern Islamic Organization, which was actually promoting this incitement, and it was of their interest. And for several years, the government was ignoring it. But then 4 years ago, the government decided enough is enough, and they removed these troublemakers from the Temple Mount. Once that happened, from mouth to ear, people heard the fact that the visiting Temple Mount was a quiet issue and not a something that was really a bother or a very non-convenient thing to do. And ever since then, more and more Jews and more non-Muslims have been coming to visit Temple Mount and have seen it quiet. And the police are actually making sure, on the one hand, to protect those going on Temple Mount. They still don't allow us to, let's say, organize a public prayer or to go up with prayer books or to dance and sing. But the very fact that on a daily basis, Jews are going up to Temple Mount and praying on their, quietly, without demonstrating the prayer too much that anybody can claim it's provocative. I think that is something that's very important. And just like the changes, I just tell you that when I started going to Temple Mount 30 years ago, we had 100 Jews annually going to Temple Mount. So we're now close to 50,000, and we are definitely be proud of the change.
This is encompassed, as you mentioned, 30 years now. You're essentially your life's work is advocating for Jewish prayer rights on the Temple Mount, for equal prayer rights on the Temple Mount, not just Jews but Christians as well. And this place holy to a diverse number of religions. What does this make you feel as you see this, as you call it, not a revolution but evolution? Where is it going?
Look, today I'm the president of a new organization called Shalom Jerusalem. We're at shalomjerusalem.org. You can read about it. And the idea is really, if we see that the world is beginning to recognize Jerusalem on a political level, the United States Embassy has moved to Jerusalem, and the Guatemala Embassy, but now they're talking about the Brazilian Embassy. But that's on the political level. We want people to recognize Jerusalem on the spiritual, godly level. And we see with our own eyes, just like the return of the Jewish people back to Israel was part of the fulfillment of prophecy, the next step in that prophecy is turning Jerusalem turning the Temple Mount into a house of prayer for all nations, and bringing the word of God to the world from Jerusalem, from the Temple Mount. And we think that with these numbers of people going up to the Temple Mount and really turning it into a world center of prayer, a house of prayer for all nations, the origin of Torah to the world, this is a major step towards the redeeming the Temple Mount and really turning it to a world center of recognition and calling in the name of God. And I think that, for instance, right now we're working on a project for next January 2021. We're going to be establishing the first Jerusalem International Bible Conference in Jerusalem, which will be bringing people from all over the world to study Bible from Jerusalem. The same time on my website, people contact me and ask me to pray for them on Temple Mount. I go up to Temple Mount at least once a week. And that's the concept. The concept is really getting people to use the fact that the Temple Mount is the center of prayer in the world, is the place that God has chose to rest His divine presence in the world. And we want it really to become the core of relationship between humanity and God. And that's where we're going. And that's we started when we started 30 years ago. It seems like something impossible. And today, more and more people are coming to.
Hello?
Yep, you broke up on me for just a moment, but I got you back. Go ahead.
Okay. And right now, the Temple Mount is really becoming what it should become, and that is a world center of connection between humanity and God.
I need to ask you, because this podcast is called Synagogue and State, but this movement really didn't seem to have much impetus from the state itself. And even though there's been a religious Zionist aspect to this right-wing government for quite some time, it seems as if this government as a whole wants the issue of the Temple Mount to just kind of go away. It's too incendiary. It can lead to too many problems when you look at the Kotel, the Western Wall complex as a whole. In your time in the government, did you get any assistance from government entities in trying to push forward this movement for prayer?
Yeah. And by all means, for sure, yes. I can say that the initiative of outlawing the I would say the terror and the harassment from Temple Mount was, of course, initiative that came from us as Temple Mount activists, but it was supported by the Minister of the Interior Security, Gilad Erdan, who really changed the entire attitude of the police towards those who come to Temple Mount. I would say 5 years ago, the Jews attending Temple Mount were considered a nuisance. They were immediately considered provocative, and the police did everything they could to get rid of them. Today, in the last this past government, Minister Erdogan has been pushing to recognize the rights of Jews on Temple Mount, and I think that we cannot take credit from that at all. At the same time, I can say that it's a lot of activity. It needs a lot of push from grassroots, from the bottom, and that's why the Shalom Jerusalem organization, Shalom Jerusalem Foundation, is really pushing, and that's what I'm doing right now. And I'm bringing groups of people to sign up to come to a guided tour on Temple Mount. Right now, we're sending out a newsletter about Hanukkah and the significance of Hanukkah and the Temple Mount. We're really raising the awareness of Temple Mount and its centrality in the relationship between humanity and God. And I think our era, our biblical redemption era, is the time to do that. And I think that the government, at least here in Israel, it doesn't initiate things. When it feels that there's a move and a wave from below, then they respond, and they can be very helpful. And I think that this time I can definitely say the change on Temple Mount is a lot thanks to the Jerusalem police who have really made a major change in their attitude, and then that's caused only good.
You mentioned there's been this quiet change, and you said it hasn't led to World War III. But as we know, in this particular region of the world, in this particular location specifically, there's always that spark that can lead to a fire. Obviously, you can't live your life and hold your beliefs around a constant fear of what may be. But is there any concern that as this evolution, as you call it, progresses into different things, into bigger things, that it could, in fact, lead to a conflict on the Temple Mount?
I'd say vice versa. When people see, I'll tell you just an example. Maybe it's a totally different example, but in 1997, Israel opened the temple, what was called the Western Wall tunnels, and there was a lot of violence because of the opening of the tunnels. And people said it's dangerous, it's a provocative issue. Why are you doing it? And we had some few days of tension. What Israel could have said, okay, let's close down the Western Wall tunnels because it's causing tension. Instead, the Israelis said, no, we're going to keep it open. And today, we have more than 1 million people who visit the Western Wall tunnels on a daily, annually, and people being quiet, because when you get used to things, and I think the same thing when right now people are used to the fact that Temple Mount is a tourist venue. People get used to the fact that Temple Mount is a prayer venue, and then they get used to it and they understand that we're here for good and we're not going anywhere. As soon as you're hesitant, as soon as you show weakness, as soon as you turn your back and you say, oh, we're going to be afraid, then immediately the terror people identify that and immediately act as expected of them. But I'm just saying that therefore it's very important to be determined to encourage more and more people to come, and the more people come, the quieter it'll be, because people will see, hey, it's a place where everybody's coming to.
Government policies oftentimes don't survive the government once the government is no longer in power. Obviously, there is quite a conundrum right now in Israeli politics and the paralysis. Who knows where a third election will take us, but there can always be a change in government. Benny Gantz seems to be gaining ground in the polls, although the polls are often worthless. My point is that there could be a change, and there could be a change more toward the center. Do you worry about changing government policy should Benny Gantz take over?
First of all, I'm most worried about the instability, and as you said, the situation today, the political situation here in Israel, is very disturbing. It's very sad, but at the same time, I must say that the Blue and White Party, led by Benny Gantz, is a party which is not on the extreme left. It's not a party that we would say that is going to be totally going towards the Palestinian interest. I think some of the people who are leading Benny Gantz's party, including Moshe Ya'alon, who was the defense minister in this government, at the beginning, and others in the party, such as Tzvi Hauser and Yoav Hendel, are people that are definitely tending towards the right, and therefore I really I'm not worried, but at the same time I know that it's all based on the demand from the ground, and that's why we in ShalomJerusalem.org, and that's why in Shalom Jerusalem Foundation, why we are actually very, very strongly active now to put facts on the ground. And when you put facts on the ground, then that's what those are the strongest facts you can do, because you can speak up, you can even an army can capture, but if you read the Bible, in the book of Joshua, the army captured the whole land, but in the book of Judges, suddenly there are problems, and it's a very simple reason. Wherever you put facts on the ground is where it stays, the situation stays stable. If you just announce and make an official announcement, that's not what changes things.
I look at your Shalom Jerusalem Foundation page, and the motto, the slogan is Zionism, the next generation. There is talk every day in the Twitterverse, in media, about Zionism and what it means and what it doesn't mean and the changing aspect of it. And what does Zionism, and specifically when you say the next generation of Zionism, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to Israel?
Thank you for that question. Because, the return to Israel, the process was called the Zionist movement, which began at the end of the 19th century. Israel did not have, the people of Israel didn't have our own state. Not alone that they did not recognize the fact that we're a nationality, which is only finally today recognized by the President of the United States in his last signing the executive order. But I can say that at the time when Theodor Herzl spoke about a state, it was something far-fetched, and it seemed like something almost impossible. And surprisingly, 50 years after the first Zionist Congress, the state of Israel was established. Now we've been for the first 70 years, we were struggling to build a state. We were struggling to establish a modern state with hospitals and with agriculture and with universities and with import and export, etc. Today we are very strong. We're one of the 10 strongest countries in the world, and it's time to look on our next step. And Zion in the Bible is referred to the Temple Mount. If you read in Psalms chapter 2 or in Joel chapter 4, it always refers to the fact that the Zion is the name of the temple. Jerusalem was called the city of Zion because the city where the temple stood. Now, the question is, what is our goal? And in my eyes, our goal is to be a light to the nations. Our goal is that the blessing that we received based on the promises God gave to our patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, were that we will be a blessing, and through us, all the families of the nation will be blessed. And I think the recognition of Jerusalem as a world center of connecting humanity and God, meaning all of us are part of one big puzzle, or all of us are part of one symphony, and we have to work together. That message can come from Jerusalem, the city of Shalom. The city of Shalom, meaning Shalom not only in the concept of tolerance, but Shalom more as a concept of inclusiveness, of referring to all of us as being different, worshiping one God. And I think that's our major assignment as the state of Israel in our second level of Zionism, is after we've been established as a state, to really serve the state's essence, and that is to really be a connection, a bridge between the world and itself, among different nations, and between the world and God.
Yehudah Glick, I'd be remiss if we didn't complete this podcast with an update on you personally. You, as I mentioned at the top, an amazing story. Number one, surviving an assassination attempt for your work on the Temple Mount, and of course, your story with your wife Yafa. I know you had a number of children together, adopted others, took on more as legal guardians when your neighbors were killed in terrorist attacks, and unfortunately, Yafa passing away in early 2018. Since then, though, it appears you've fallen in love again and have remarried. I believe a year to the date that Yafa passed away. Now married, or at least engaged to Hadass, and later married. Tell us about your personal life and where it stands right now, and are you happy?
I think you really summed it up. 5 years ago, in October 2014, there was an attempt to assassinate me. My beloved wife Yafi was next to me and accompanied me in the healing, in the hospitalizing, and in the rehabilitation. And she really gave her whole life to me. But once I came out of my issues and pretty much returned to normal life, I'm still suffering different kinds of pain. But in general, I was back to life. Unfortunately, she became very ill. And as you said, on January 1st, 2018, Yudalet Tevet, 2018, she passed away. It was very, very terrible trauma for me. We were married for 26 years. As you said, we had she was a widower beforehand, and she had 2 children, and we married, and we had 4 children together. We adopted 2 children, and you said we also sort of adopted a family of a terror victim, which 2 parents were killed. For a year, I was a widower. And then, as being a member of the Knesset, I was introduced to Hadass, who's today my wife, and she was a widow for 17 years. She had 4 kids she raised by herself. And she established an organization called Amitim, which means the brave, for young orphans and widows. And exactly, I would say, since then, I've been really engaged in the topic of dealing with orphans and widows together with my wonderful wife, Hadass. We celebrate our anniversary. Today is exactly our anniversary of 10 months and 26 days. Tomorrow we have an anniversary of 10 months and 27 days. Yesterday we had an anniversary of 10 months and 25 days. And thank God we're working together. And I believe that's also some kind of sign from God, because both in Isaiah chapter 1 and in Zechariah chapter 7, it talks about before building the temple, you have to remember the orphan and the widow. So here, my soulmate of today, Hadass, is really an unbelievable person. She's involved in young orphans and widows who passed away not from terror and not from war, but on civilian issues. People have passed away from cancer or from other illnesses, from car accidents, from work accidents, from any kind of suicide issues, etc. And she has like 30,000 orphans like that here in Israel, which she is accompanying. And even this coming up Hanukkah, she's organizing a big happening for all of them. She's really a wonderful thing. And today we're living together in Jerusalem with my 8 children, her 4 children, my 9 grandchildren. And God is really accompanying us and filling our house with our life with so much light.
I'm happy to hear that, and I told you personally, and I'll tell our listeners as well, in my time covering the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, I always appreciated, whether I agreed with you or not, your honesty, regardless of the political implications, your points of view, regardless of the political implications. It's very difficult to find that within the Knesset, as members often toe the line. So left, right, or center, I always appreciated those few that would always give their honest and unfiltered viewpoints, and you were among the few. Thank you. Keep doing that, no matter the cost. And we really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I really hope to be worthy of such compliments. It really is touching my heart, but it's an obligation to continue trying to be as honest as possible. And from Jerusalem, I send blessings to all of the listeners of this podcast, and I wish you good luck from Jerusalem.
Thank you so much. Yehudah Glick, former member of Knesset, Temple Mount activist, and current president of the Shalom Jerusalem Foundation. More can be found at JerusalemofPeace.com. Thanks to Yehudah Glick. I'm your host, Mike Wagenheim. Bye-bye, Yehudah. We appreciate you joining us. You've been listening to the i24 News Podcast, Synagogue and State. We'll talk to you again next week.